What's up, Coordination? On the pod today, we have David Phelps, who is one of the founding members of JokeDAO, EcoDAO, and CowFund. In this episode, we talk about building Regen DAOs. We talk about the infinite garden of projects, of the fauna and the organisms that are all building on top of each other, and how together they create an ecosystem that's gestalt is greater than the sum of its parts. So quite a fun episode with David. I really like to hang out with the OG builders and hear what they're thinking, how they're thinking about things. And David is just one of those. So a pretty fun episode. Without further ado, I give you David Phelps.
Working in Web3 is awesome, but working outside of the typical W-2 employee structure is a deal breaker for so many. OPOLIS is helping the self-sovereign worker focus on what they do best: their work. Tax time is coming up. OPOLIS helps professionalize your business by helping you form an entity, generate proof of employment through pay stubs, and receive a W-2 at the end of the tax year. Are you self-employed and forced to spend money on expensive healthcare insurance with limited coverage? OPOLIS leverages group buying power through a community employment co-op, helping you save 20 to 50% on high-quality, affordable healthcare options through Cigna. And finally, OPOLIS's member owners share in OPOLIS's success and profits based on their work token holdings. You must be authorized to work inside the United States and select Canadian provinces to receive OPOLIS's benefits. Book a 30-minute free consultation with OPOLIS's experts and join OPOLIS by March 31st, 2023 to get 1,000 work and 1,000 bank tokens. Go to connect.opolis.co/bankless to get started. And if you're going to ETH Denver, make sure to stop by the OPOLIS booth or attend their Future of Work Summit hosted by OPOLIS. The Glow dollar is a new stablecoin with a very special property. As the market cap of Glow goes up, extreme poverty goes down. Glow is a dollar-backed, non-profit stablecoin that creates basic income for people living in extreme poverty. Glow is basically the same business model as USDC, with yield-generating treasuries on one side and a stablecoin on Ethereum on the other. But instead of being a for-profit company, Glow is a non-profit that donates 100% of all yields from the Glow Reserve to Give Directly's basic income program. Give Directly is a charity that gives people money, no strings attached, to people living in poverty, and is a charity that Vitalik has previously donated to and supported in the past. With Glow, you can reduce poverty just by holding a stablecoin. Glow is launching in early 2023, and you can join the waitlist at glowdollar.org/greenpill. That's glodollar.org/greenpill.
What's up, David?
What's up? How's it going?
Chilling. So glad to have you. I think that we've been planning this episode for a while, so let's get into it. What are you working on?
So I'm building this thing called JokeDAO, which is on-chain governance. So a way for any online community to be able to make, execute, and reward decisions. You keep me going. I'm just going to recite the entire spiel, so cut me off.
Yeah, well, no, I think that we want to get the spiel, but I was hoping that you would tell it to me as a joke, since it's called JokeDAO.
Absolutely not. No, you're gonna have to stake tokens for that and like pay me for that. Like, this is crypto. I don't do things for free.
That's right. Yeah, I'll have to incentivize that behavior. Well, take us down the rabbit hole. So how do I use JokeDAO?
Yeah. So super simple. You set up what we call a contest, and a contest means that as a contest creator, you put a prompt to a community. That prompt could be like, hey, what should we focus on? Or like, hey, here's a proposal. Can you submit another version of it? Or, hey, here's a project I want to build. Does anyone want to build this, right? Or, hey, I'm a writer. I'm writing on my newsletter. What topics do you want me to cover? It could be any sort of prompt you want, right? In the submissions period, community can submit options. We call them proposals, right, in response. And then in the voting period, they can vote on their favorites. And so what is special about this is, first of all, that communities now are actually having active say in being able to submit and say what they want, right? They're not just voting as their voice, they're actually having voice to say the kind of things that they want, right? Second, you design who gets to submit and who gets to vote. So if you want just your core team to submit options and your community to vote on them, which is how DAO governance has always been done to date, you can do that. But you can also do the reverse, right? You can have your community all submit options and then just a core team votes on them. You could have like a hackathon where like everyone submits their project, right? And then like a jury of top people in the space vote on their favorites. You can have a totally separate community do it, right? You could say, I could go governance vampire attack the Gitcoin community by saying, hey, GTC holders, I'm airdropping you the submission token. I want your best ideas, and I'm going to reward the best of you with my token. And I'm going to steal you all from Gitcoin and bring you over into my nefarious project that I'm working on as well. And then the final thing, right, is that in the voting period, because it's ranked choice voting, it effectively means nobody is voting against something publicly. You're just voting for for the options that are most meaningful to you. And so you actually get like a good measure of like people's passion. So if you're doing a grants round, right, instead of having like every single grant be individually approved, yes or no, you can actually see which of those grants the community cares most about, and you can allocate your resources to those.
So it feels like it's kind of a collective intelligence tool, token gated, or maybe like a modular approach to building collective intelligence.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, you know, I was chatting this morning with a friend of mine about how you could use this for prediction markets, and being like, you know, could you use this as an educational tool where people would be like, here's what I think, you know, the economy is going to look like 6 months from now, and then we all predict what it's going to look like. And the point of that is not actually, you know, to get useful data on what the economy will look like. It's to have this kind of gamified structure for learning, where whoever's right wins a reward, everyone else has to explain why they're wrong, right? And so you can start using this in like educational settings, collective intelligence. You could use it for, you know, maybe some more accurate prediction markets if you're really careful with who gets to vote and submit. But completely, it's about unlocking like the actual potential of like creative contribution for people to be able to participate, which is, you know, I hope what the unlock of DAOs is, but not something that we've seen a lot to date.
Is it called JokeDAO because you can use it to select better jokes, or is it because the logo is a Joker up here on the top left?
It's because we started with a logo and then we were like, fuck, what are we going to call this? I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I'm going to. You know, I don't know what we call this thing. No, so there's a few reasons. One is that we started with a proof of concept called the joke race, which still runs every week, where you vote on your favorite joke. Your goal is to get second place. If you put too many votes, you go to first, you lose. And so that was really the proof of concept to kind of test out my theses with like the easiest and most fun way to do it. You know, would having a mechanism like this build relationships where people are incentivized to collaborate with each other socially, and then do this, you know, every week? And it worked. And so that's part of it. I think the other pretentious answers that I really like to give for this one is that jokes are the original decentralized technology. Jokes are passed down P2P. We have no idea who the original teller was. We don't care who the original teller was. What we care about is how someone's inflection of that joke is unique, right? And so even if you've heard the joke a bunch of times, it's about the telling of it, right? More than it's about the content. I think it's a really beautiful distributed system of like, of this decentralized creation that has no single person who's created this. It's retold every time in the process. I think the other thing is to think like, you know, kind of the ethos of joke is I think the words we use are like batshit anarchist, and like it's pretty important to us to think that like crypto is kind of a batshit anarchist thing. It's like the fact that you can take anybody else's work and fork it, build on top of it without asking their permission, right? And just like all kind of contribute to innovation on top of each other permissionlessly. Like that's something where it's like the fundamental ethos, I think, of crypto and why I get excited by it is it's not too serious. You can't take anyone else's work too seriously. You always have to take it as a little bit of a joke, and then think about how you can improve on it, take it, play with it, etc. And so that's why I love working in this
designer,
space,
the sort of like website designer in me likes this idea of starting with something that's as fun and easy and lighthearted as telling a joke. And then if you get people using it, going through the loop of actually using it for that, then you can actually, now you've got enough data points that you can start adding complexity or seriousness to it, to that same infrastructure, and they can actually use it for real things. Because a lot of these governance problems are like, governance feels like work, and if you can make it feel like fun to start, and then get the data emissions that are actually useful for economic means out of that, then I think that it's just a better way to approach getting people to use the system.
Yeah, I think like, what are the issues with governance? Well, one is it's not fun. So if you actually want decentralized communities to participate, like it needs to be fun. And it's like, look, the move over the past 10 years in culture has been completely towards like interactive fan communities. Like you look at TikTok, right? You look at like successful YouTube creators, like they create interactive fan communities where they're listening, responding to their fans, right? In this way. DAOs are just a version of that. DAOs are like just the outcome of this like, you know, move over the past 10 years for communities to have more say. But the reason they do that is not the financial incentives. The reason they do that is the social incentives, that this is a fun thing to do. And that's the thing that we've just been missing in DAOs. Like if you have to vote and you're publicly saying no against a friend of yours, you're not going to want to do that. That's not a fun process to engage in, right? I think also governance is not paid, I would add, is a big issue. Like, you know, really difficult governance, like making big financial decisions, like that is work. And that is work that requires a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of thought, and deserves to be compensated, I think, accordingly as well. And so that's why building on chain is really important for us. it's also a way to be able to compensate people for doing governance. And then the question is like, who should be making these decisions? And that's a longer tangent. But I think like the way we built it was to be as modular as possible. So you have the design space to say who you want to submit, who you want to vote, and you as a community can decide how you design that governance process in terms of who you want to have say and how much say they have.
Yeah, it's kind of like a return for me of user-centric design in crypto terms. Because I think in 2017, there was this feeling that like, if you take a human and you put a token in them, you will get out an action. And it's just like people aren't that rational, nor do they give a shit about your like token that you're doing. And I like, starting from the other end.
I think so. Like I think about that a lot, right? That like Web 2.1, and became big purely through social incentives, right? There's no financial incentives in Web 2, and that's part of the argument that Web 3 has against Web 2 is like the fact that you are being monetized, your data is being harvested, you're making money for corporations. But it's not like people don't know that. They fundamentally are fine losing all of that financial upside. Because the social incentives are so great, right? And so like 99% of people will happily give up, financial upside in order to have a good time with friends. And like, why wouldn't they? That's the logical thing you should do. And so, yeah, I think like, until Web 3 is, first of all, as easy to use as Web 2, but also has the same social incentives, like Web 3's, opportunity is not replacing social incentives with financial incentives. That's what we've seen to date, and it hasn't worked. Like Web 3's potential is adding financial incentives to social incentives for people to get fairly compensated for the value.
It kind of reminds me of this idea that like if you take something and if you reward someone with extrinsic motivation for doing action X and then you withdraw the extrinsic motivation, they will stop doing that action. But if you start where someone is already intrinsically doing it, not only do you like you have the intrinsic plus the extrinsic motivation, but it just feels like a more solid foundation for building these Web3 tools.
And it's kind of like why bear markets are these self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Because as soon as things start to go bad, then there's no opportunity to make money here. Then everyone else withdraws. So it's not just like people are withdrawing because they're scared and because they're losing money. And it's also because like they were only here because they could make money. And now that we're in an environment where we can't, we lose all our users. Like, if fundamentally we can only have users when prices are going up, like that's definitely not a sustainable system for the future.
And one of the things I like about the Regen Web3 space is like people are kind of here a little bit intrinsically. You have to want to build it for that reason. And so, the Regen Web3 space, there's less capital, but there's not less action in the bear market this time around.
Completely. Yeah, I think that's also what's great about the bear market is it does, wipe out a lot of people, good and bad, but it also means that the people who stick around are the people who are, they're the builders and the ones who are committed for ideological reasons rather than just, pure financial speculation, which is nice. But hopefully it means we can find a use case for others that isn't just pure financial speculation as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. Okay, so we covered JokeDAO. You're also associated with CowFund and EcoDAO, so I'm wondering if we could cover those real quick.
Yeah. So CowFund is a Web3 Angels collective that I started, where we're actually not a fund, we're not a DAO, and we're not a cow. So, which are I would say the top three things that we tend to be mistaken for, especially the cow. So yeah, the idea, CowFund is a work in progress. I see it as kind of like a 20-year project in some ways. And it's really about being able to get a bunch of angels together who are all builders in the space and being able to, collectively work together to source deals, share deals, and invest. And like what gets exciting about this, I think, is like on the angel side, where you have a bunch of angels who can benefit not only from sharing deals, but from each other's insight, right? Where now you have top devs as well as top UI UX people, top product people, top founders, top business minds, all very different backgrounds and very different parts of the space who can all share perspective and learn a lot from each other, which is good for investing, but it's also just fun as a social activity. And then for founders, they can just, in one go meet a bunch of Web3, builders who they can work with as well. And like, part of my excitement about DAOs is like long-term imagining a future where builders are the ones who are really owning a lot of the, let's not call it equity, let's call it entities that they're associated with. And so I think this is, in some rough way, a very, very like small first kind of step towards that. is really thinking like how can builders work together in order to like really support each other and support each other's projects.
Right. Okay. Got it. So that's CowSwap.
CowFund. Alas, CowSwap, I would be a good deal richer than I am.
Excuse me. Got it. And then so EcoDAO.
Yeah. So EcoDAO is the first DAO I started, and so EcoDAO is what I'm calling a pop-up DAO. This has become, I don't think I came up with this term. The idea of a pop-up DAO is like something that's really great with DAOs, which is that they can exist when they want to and they don't exist when they don't. If you're looking at building something that just needs sustainable revenue in order to keep itself afloat, and it doesn't need to become a multi-billion-dollar business, it doesn't need to accrue massive revenue, it's just there for the sake of being able to sustain itself financially, I think that's actually a huge unlock for a lot of projects. And so EcoDAO is kind of like that. It's almost like a high school club in a way, where it's like a bunch of people who are passionate about a cause using crypto to make this thing financially sustainable without any sort of goal of this becoming, a giant enterprise or anything like that. And so the way it works is we typically will sell NFTs from artists, and then we split. So 50% goes to the artist, 25% goes to ecological causes, 25% goes to the DAO, and the DAO throws events. And the events can be like parties, listening experiences, etc. With that money. And what's really nice about this is the NFT becomes an access pass to go to these events. It becomes an access pass to join this community of other people who are ideologically aligned. And if you want, it becomes a status symbol in a way of saying that you gave money to, support these good causes. I was inspired by Moonshot Bots quite a bit for this, for what it's worth. Was a huge inspiration in coming up with EcoDAO. And I think, part of my thought was like right now donations, the way that donations are done is like you give money to, like the rainforest and it's tax deductible, but like fundamentally that's money that's coming out of your wallet that you're not going to get back. And like NFTs for me were really exciting by the idea of like, well, what if you like bought an NFT because you could always resell it later? Maybe then if your money is going towards the rainforest, you're going to be willing to put in 10, 20 times as much money as you would have otherwise, because this is money you could actually get back, right? This is money that might, in your mind, constitute an investment of some kind. Or at least just, maybe it doesn't make any money, but it breaks even. Or even if it loses money, you lose 50%, but you don't lose 100%. And so like all of that just, makes NFTs as a fundraising model, like a lot more exciting than I think traditional donations. And so that was really the impetus for it. We've done 3 events over the past year. We're currently, this is alpha, planning another one for ETH Denver as well that we're really excited by.
Yeah, well, thanks for your kind words about Moonshot Bots. That was, of course, an NFT that Austin and I launched that was designed to fund public goods. So basically, you bought the NFT, you got public goods, and it's neat to see this sort of like genetic, or I guess mimetic, cross-pollination between the two projects. And David, I really appreciate that you still have your Moonshot Bot as your profile picture on Twitter.
Well, I think I will always have my Moonshot Bot as my VFP. It's my favorite piece of crypto. Is that a term? That I own? And so I love that project so much, and I love repping it. And having this association with this really quite badly drawn robot.
It's an 8-bit pixel robot. It's good for an 8-bit pixel robot.
Yeah, there we go. For 8-bots, it's pretty. 8-bits is pretty
fun
good.
Fun little anecdote on tokenization. Is that the Moonshot Bots were live on the Gitcoin avatar builder for about a year and a half, and people didn't care at all. And then you make them into an NFT and you put them on OpenSea, and then you raise $3 million for public goods. So crypto is weird, man.
Well done.
Yeah, well, same to you. I mean, I think, David, you're such a prolific DAO creator. I mean, CowFund, EcoDAO, JokeDAO. It seems like you're really kind of breadth first, launching things, taking them from 0 to 1, and then doubling down on them, building communities. That's the thread that I would draw through all 3 of the projects that you just told me about. But I'm curious how you would draw the thread between everything that you've been involved in. Maybe those 3 projects are just a start.
Yeah, I do think that like lowering the barriers to experimentation is like one of the greatest things we can do in this space. Like if you can allow a bunch of people to each put in like 0.1 ETH and then decide what they want to what cause they want to put that towards. And maybe that's a donation, right? They're deciding we're all going to donate together. We're going to maximize our impact by pooling this capital. But maybe it's like they want to start a company or they want to launch something. That's a fundamental use case for JokeDAO, obviously, right? But it's also just I think a fundamental thing that I'm excited by, which is letting anybody participate in these systems, very low friction, and being able to pull capital in ways that can be really meaningful. And so I do think, experimentation is kind of the best thing that we can be doing right now. I do subscribe to that, school of thought that DAOs are operate almost as almost as in a system of biodiversity, right? That each one can be forked, can build a new species. Many of those will be mutants and die. Other ones will thrive. The idea that evolution is a better version is absolutely not true. The way evolution works is by creating an ecosystem of different creatures that all support and sustain each other, right? And so real evolution is about maximizing diversity for, and experimenting as much as possible to have different projects that can support each other that might not even survive on their own. They might need each other to survive, right, as well. And I think that's where forkability, but also composability gets really exciting with DAOs being able to work together. And so, being able to experiment, freely, I think is important. I definitely see my calling at this point is very much the joke verse, and very much focused on building out these contests as I think, these primitives for communities to be formed, and to build relationships with each other and to generate actual sustainable revenue in a way that hasn't been done before. But one thing I'll mention that I think is really exciting is within the joke universe, there's this thing called the Joke Race Council, where every week people play the joke race, they vote on their favorite jokes. The winner is number 2. It's minted as an NFT. The NFT holders join this thing called the Joke Race Council. And it also, this is another, Moonshot Bot's inspiration. It's really devoted to public goods funding. It's built up a treasury of about 15 ETH so far from sales. And Jihad and LDF are going to be taking this over now, and are going to start deploying that capital towards just the craziest, wildest experimentation possible. And that's really the point, is to say can we build out this universe by having a micro incubator for experimental projects that actually can give some utility to tokens as well. And so my focus is not on that. My focus is on contests. I have, this vision of what I want to build there and why I'm excited by it. But within that broader mandate of the community, there is this wonderful community that's building income and is going to be able to deploy it to all sorts of experiments. And I think that it's a really exciting model to see, because I do think experimentation is absolutely at the core of what is exciting about crypto. It's the fact that, if you want to start a new company in Web2, you had to start it from the ground up, right? You want to start something in Web3, you just fork somebody else's code and you build on top of it. Lowering the barriers of experimentation is fundamentally the great use case of this space.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I think that there's a lot of directions that we could go, but maybe setting a frame and just running on your evolutionary narrative there. I've been really inspired by this concept and thought from Aya Miyaguchi, the EF executive director, that Ethereum is like an infinite garden, and that you have this ecosystem of fauna and organisms and plants that are all growing on top of each other and sort of developing in symbiosis with each other. Gitcoin to JokeDAO to CowFund to ETH Global to Uniswap. And because they're all modular components, they all do one thing and do them well. They each occupy an ecosystem niche, and then they interoperate with each other to create an ecosystem that's greater, that's super modular, that's greater than the sum of its parts would be individually if you just added them up. 1 + 1 = 3. And so setting the frame of this evolutionary narrative in this infinite garden is kind of how I see these things sort of codepending on each other, interrelating with each other. And the interdependence of them becomes really interesting as they evolve over time. Like Joe Lubin said, it doesn't take a killer app, it takes a killer ecosystem, right? So, I think that it's with that frame that I would want to continue the episode and talk about how these things all relate to each other and how your projects are evolving.
Yeah, I love that. And I make no secret of the ways that these projects have taken inspiration. Nouns has been an incredible inspiration for everything I think we're doing with Joke right now. And Gitcoin, it's like we used Gitcoin grant rounds to be able to raise our funds for EcoDAO, right? Initially, we wouldn't exist, without these projects in terms of the inspiration that they've been ideologically, but we also wouldn't exist without a lot of them practically. Just like the tools there, right, to have micro incubators, et cetera, which is in some ways what I think Gitcoin is, have just been immensely powerful for us.
Yeah, well, and likewise, same to you. I don't know whether Gitcoin's planning on doing it or not, but I know that they were kicking around when I was there, playing with JokeDAO in order to do some collective intelligence things for grant skating and fraud defense and stuff like that. So it'd be neat to see the tools further interoperate. I like the idea that like your protocol supports someone early, and then they come back and they support you as you're building out your ecosystem. That's what it means to be in the infinite garden together.
I think so. I think like one thing I'd like to see more of with these kind of like incubators is like if you're a brand, if you're a decentralized brand, I think this is the question that kind of plagues NFT projects. You're a decentralized brand. How are you giving quote unquote equity to the people who build you out? And this has been a massive problem for NFT projects, right? Because like, their holders are rich people who like can afford a lot of money to like buy a digital collectible and a JPEG. And then those are not the people who are incentivized to actually build. So then you need to go get people to actually build out the value of your brand, right? But who are those people? Like, well, Nouns found a really good model for this, which is recurring contests with a collective financing, right? It's like Bored Apes, it's like every individual owner just owns rights to their individual ape, but there's no collective financing from all the ape holders coming together and sharing financing towards the project as a whole. Nouns, I think, was really kind of like a 10x, for me, 10x improvement on this by like letting everybody collectively deploy capital. But I think the question still is there, which is like, okay, builders maybe now are getting paid, but are they getting quote unquote equity? Like, are they getting upside in the brand that they're creating? And it's like, if the NFTs are only held by like the richest people, and then how are the builders actually getting some sort of upside here as well? And yeah, I think it's just a question that kind of still plagues the ecosystem, and there hasn't been a really great answer for, but something I'm increasingly spending, I would say, a lot of time thinking about, which is like, how are we really giving builders proper incentive to be part of these brands and to help build them out and to be part of those communities? And what does it mean to bring people in, give them tokens, and give them upside in that way as well? Because I think that really feels like the next generation of like what's going to be promising.
Well, 2 points I want to make there. One is that I envision in my mind's eye this sort of DAO of DAOs in which there's a mesh network of governance tokens and projects that all rise together. And as opposed to the old world where they compete with each other for market share by elbowing each other out, rising and falling together, it seems really exciting. Like if each of these projects did token swaps with each other, then they would rise and fall together. And then the second thing that I'll put out there before I volley it back to you is this idea of, I learned this from Gregory Landua, who's a past guest of the podcast, but this idea of keystone species, which are basically species upon which entire ecosystems rely on. So like on Earth, then like humans are a keystone species because we have dogs and like corn and apples and all these rodents in New York depend on humans, right? So like in crypto, in the infinite garden, what are the keystone species? And I want to say that like Uniswap is likely a keystone species because it's where everyone goes to get liquidity to trade token X for token Y. I do think that like, right now there's a battle to see who's going to be the keystone species of L2s, like what's the DNA that's going to go in all these different L2s and app chains that people are going to launch. But Nouns, because you were excited about Nouns, it just like feels like one consistent thoroughfare is like Nouns. It created this like punctuated equilibrium in this ecosystem that really is healthy and regenerative around them. And so I just wanted to call out this idea of keystone species and also DAO of DAOs before I volley it back to you.
Yeah, I love that idea. I would say every species is a keystone species in some ways. You look at parasites; it's just incredible how they have to like imitate 3 different species behaviors a lot of times, or understand that at some level to evolve. But yeah, like I don't know, a creature I think a lot about is the tapir. Tapir is one of my favorite animals, and they're gorgeous creatures. They march through the jungles in the rainforest, and fundamentally, like their job in the ecosystem is to eat berries and shit out berries. And because tapirs eat berries and shit out berries, they are responsible for propagating all of the fruits, plant life, right, of the jungle. And so if you ever got rid of the tapir, the rainforest would be in pretty deadly state, because the tapir is effectively is a distributor, right, of plants all around, because it shits out berries. And it's like, yeah, who's shitting out berries in, like, you know, in crypto, I think is a great question to ask. I would say Gitcoin is a great berry shitter from you know, like right at the top of the list.
Team, we've got a new testimonial that no one will understand without the context.
Making this up as I go. Yeah, like you know, who's redistributing everyone else's work in this, like, you know, meaningful way, and to let it thrive, propagate, regrow in new environments. Like that's so powerful. The point about composability, I think about that so much, because it's like a lot of, I think, the unlock for, I don't think I'm giving away anything here. Like a lot of the unlock for what we're really building with Joke is like the idea that you make decisions and they can be executed on chain, right? And so like, because it's on-chain governance, like effectively, if you say, hey, who should join our multi-sig, you can automatically then have that person added to your Gnosis safe, right? Or you're safe now. It's no longer Gnosis. If you want to say like who should be secretary, you can automatically mint them like a badge. It could be like a PKP3 lit, where it's like that gives you access rights to Dropbox, that gives you access rights to Google Drive, to your email, etc., right, through an NFT, and that's automatically given to them. And so it's like onboarding, totally done. If you want to, like, you know, say what cause do we want to raise money for? You know, you pull capital, send it to a juice box, let everyone raise money for it, right? What NFT collection do we want to buy? Let them like go there, right? And like, you know, turns into a party bid. Like our ability to succeed, I think, is ultimately as a protocol in which people will build on top of us, and we can integrate those services internally, so that like any decision you make can automatically be executed across all these other services. And like all that is it's what my co-founder Sean would say is like taking advantage of blockchains as open APIs. But it's just, it means that you build a company in a totally different way than you would build a company in Web 2. Because in Web 2, you would not want to prioritize integrations, right? That would not be the first thing you would want to do. You would want to probably compete or be able to build those in-house and internally. And like anything that's sending people away from your site is considered deadly. But in Web 3, it's the opposite. Because like if we can support all those other projects in the ecosystem, like through voting, and we are now driving users to all those other services, they're also probably going to be incentivized to send to us. Maybe we can share revenue potentially, and you can create this composable ecosystem where we are each other's moat. Like we are all supporting one another in this like open ecosystem because we all are sharing users and providing integrated services. And it's just a totally different way of building a company than you would ever want to build a company in Web 2, where everything is siloed completely. And so it's like, it's an interesting thing, because like I think even when you talk to people in the space, a lot of people who come from Web 2, I mean, you and I both come from Web 2, but like I think a lot of people who come from Web 2 don't quite understand just how powerful integrations are as a business development tool, because it's not true in Web 2. Like they're not great BD tools in Web 2, but in Web 3, they're the most powerful moat that you can probably create.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that a lot of these things are really powerful and really compelling. You know, the critique I get from the outsiders is, okay, but y'all are supporting each other. Like crypto is just this insular thing that looks inwards and builds for crypto. Yeah, that's, you know, one way to put it. And you know, I guess like the thing that my reaction to that is like, okay, there needs to be things that actually produce value for everyday people, and that create value out of this infrastructure. And there's going to be sort of a network effect between building infrastructure for crypto and crypto being able to provide value for the world. So, you know, I don't know if you know what those like fundamental value drivers will be, but for me, it feels like reinventing financial infrastructure that people depend on, loans, insurance, jobs, public goods infrastructure funding, art funding is one that I didn't expect in the last cycle. And those are all things that fundamentally help everyday humans, regardless of whether or not they're in crypto or not. I don't know if you have any reaction to that.
Right. Yeah, I think there's two ways to look at it. Like one is, what are people willing to pay for? Like, you know, people are willing to pay to, you know, for financial opportunity. And that fundamentally is at the heart of crypto. Like, you know, financial opportunity, call it speculation, call it whatever you want, needs to be incorporated. But I think social incentives, right? Like the ability to join meaningful communities and take part in meaningful action, like is something people pay for. And we see that, like, this is why, you know, creators will pay to be able to submit their films to a film festival, or submit, you know, their remix to be considered by the DJ that they remixed. Like creator communities, things that people are willing to pay for, are still a massive unlock for this space. But we just haven't created like what I would call like two-way revenue flows, where people are paying in order to get out. Something that isn't just money, but is also, you know, social and reputational as well. So I think that's one answer. I do think at a deeper level, right? Like, what are we doing here? If there isn't actual real world use cases, something I've been thinking about a lot recently is like, if you think about 2017, the really big use cases that everyone was talking about in 2017 for crypto, in my memory, were like, it was prediction markets, right? This idea that, yeah, you like Augur, you'd be able to predict, like, you know, who would be president, right? And then there was supply chains, like you'd be able to track exactly, you know, a piece of corn on the blockchain and throughout its entire journey, to know that it was organic, it was harvested by farmers, they were paid fairly, and then you could disintermediate all of these other like tracking devices and tools just to be able to like directly buy corn from farmers, you know, and be able to verify that this is organic, sustainable, and it's good. And I remember these being like really big use cases, right? Supply chains and like prediction markets, both totally flopped. It was way too early for either one of those. It didn't really work. And what's interesting is those didn't make a comeback, right? And like 2020, 2021, the use cases for crypto that people were excited by were not those, because like prediction markets, supply chains are like real world use cases. It's about like applying crypto to the actual like real world we live in. The use cases that became really exciting in 2020, 2021 were crypto applied to crypto. It was like, and even today, this is still true, right? It's like, you know, yield farming, right, is a really big one. Or like MEV. MEV is awesome. I'm pro MEV. I love that there's like, you know, you can build revenue from MEV. I'm really bullish on that whole space. But like MEV matters because you are in some ways indexing on the transactions that are going through a blockchain. And why are people transacting in the first place? They're not transacting for MEV. They're transacting because there has to be some, you know, fundamental use case for them to be there, right? And so I think, like, in retrospect, when you think about like how the narrative switched from 2017 to 2021, we went from like talking about all these real world use cases that were just way too early and way too quixotic, to talking about all these much more kind of insular use cases for crypto being useful for crypto. It probably should have been assigned to us in retrospect that really wasn't going to be sustainable. Like that was probably doomed to crash. And it didn't feel like it at the time. It felt like we were getting all this adoption, artists and NFTs, et cetera. But like, in retrospect, like, yeah, crypto does need to solve for something besides crypto for all those other things like MEV to be really useful, I think.
Like a similar to
NFTs,
the criticism I've heard of Silicon Valley, which is like Silicon Valley is only solving for Silicon Valley problems. Like, what do you do when your rent is sky high and you want to order groceries and have them delivered with like TaskRabbits and stuff like that? It's just kind of like a bubble. And I think that for crypto to truly have a positive effect on the world, it's got to provide utility for the median citizen of humanity, not just the people who are privileged enough to live in Silicon Valley or to have huge bags and stuff like that.
Yeah, like a worst case scenario is like Axie, but a game that people would play if there was no financial speculation, right? And then you add on the speculation on top of that. But like that's the worst case scenario, is like what is a game people actually want to play? And the fact that we haven't come up with a single game in crypto yet that anyone actually wants to play, never mind supply chains and like transforming the environment, it just shows you how far we have to go. And we really don't deserve a bull market until I think we start answering those questions.
Yeah, totally. Well, we only have 10 minutes left, and there's a conversation that you and I had on Twitter that I wanted to briefly cover in the podcast, just because it's better to have nuanced conversations like this than it is on Twitter. And that was around Sybil Resistance, which I know that I meme a lot about. And I think that you disagreed with me about Sybil Resistance. So just to set the stage a little bit, Sybil Resistance is basically sock puppet resistance. How do we go from one token, one vote systems, which are inherently plutocratic, to one human, one vote systems, which are more democratic? And I don't remember exactly what the disagreement that we had was about Sybil Resistance, but do you recall?
Oh, did I lose you, Kevin?
Okay, let's start from the top about Sybil Resistance. We had a little connection issue right there. So what was the disagreement that we had about Sybil Resistance, and let's get into that.
Yeah, so I think the disagreement was like over full Sybil Resistance and what that would require. And so I think to have full Sybil Resistance, you'd need to catalog probably every human on the planet. And that already carries with it, you know, a kind of frightening historical weight. Like the history of, colonialism is cataloging humans, and, being able to put them on a publicly verifiable ledger that is like tied to their finances, I think is both impossible, like to try to get everyone to do it. I think it's impractical, but I think it's also terrifying in its implications when that's mapped to biometric data. And of course, the response to this will be, you're using ZK proofs, and like, this can be effectively hidden unless there's a quantum computer. At some level, you are cataloging all humans in ways that like any government, effectively can take advantage of this kind of technology to track everybody completely. It's the next iteration of surveillance culture in a way that you really have no privacy and you're being tracked at all times. Some people will like this because it means it's a deterrent against crime. I personally find it terrifying, and I think it actually changes the way we psychologically interact with each other when we know we're being watched all the time as well. And so I think like, that kind of shit scares me a lot, and I think it's also impractical as well. And so like what I'm more interested in is something like Sybil disincentivization, which is to say like track, let everybody, incentivize everybody to build up a single record on chain, right? Where the more that you've contributed to that single record as an identity, the more power you're getting as well. And so people really want to have one identity essentially that is giving them power within systems, and accruing value to that identity that they have online. And then those can all be tracked, and those can all be verified. We can see the history of everyone's transactions, but just don't have it tied to someone's biometric body. Well, that's a tautology. Don't have it tied to their body. Like fundamentally, like I do think that like the possibility of having anons, people being able to operate without state surveillance, being able to like, do transactions where they're not going to be tracked down within the real world is important to have. It's important to be able to create our own systems free from like, state control and surveillance as well. And that's part of the reason I'm excited by this space. And so like, I worry that, just the cost of full civil resistance is so great when you have lots you could do with civil disincentivization that would still lead people to maintain clear single identities online, but not have those be tethered to the real world ones either.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's a fair critique. When we were first getting into studying civil resistance on the GreenPilled podcast, we had Professor Brian Ford, who is a professor of computer science that's been studying civil resistance for almost 20 years now. I think 18 is the exact number. And he told us that there's 4 different ways of creating civil resistance. Biometric was one of them. Web of trust was another of them. Presence-based, which is basically like you're in front of me, David, so I know that you're a person. And then the last one was like nation state IDs.
Cool.
And so basically like when I hear your critique and all of the weight that it carries, I think that it applies especially to biometric, but also the nation state ID thing could be used in a pretty nefarious way if there weren't properly privacy safeguards and stuff like that. So what's your reaction to that piece of information?
Can you run through the 4 again? So what were the 4?
Government ID, biometric, web of trust, and presence-based, or a combination of those things.
So 3 out of the 4 depend on a centralized source that is cataloging everyone and maintaining that. But one of them doesn't.
Biometric,
government ID, and nation state, right? Like these all are like depending on like big entities.
Web of trust can be totally peer-to-peer. Like I vouch for David, who vouches for Alice, who vouches for Bob.
Okay, that's where my mind was going to go. Wait. So which one was that? It was government ID. Sorry. Oh, government ID is the biometric one.
Yeah, government ID slash
biometric.
No, government ID. Sorry, government ID slash like government driver's license slash passport, and then biometric, and then a separate category is web of trust, and then a 4th category is presence based. Presence is just like, hey, I'm in the presence of David right now, so I know that he's a real person.
I think web of trust and presence, maybe we could. I'm sure Professor Brian Ford has reason not to do this, but like, just hearing this initially, like those to me link together as P2P attestations. And I think P2P attestations are great. And it's like, again, for me, that qualifies as Sybil disincentivization rather than resistance, because it's not foolproof. Like you could have a conspiracy of a bunch of people who all support each other and like, all collude to try to give someone value. We see this on Twitter all the time, right? Like bots who talk up other bots in order to make them look legitimate. But like fundamentally, that seems like a really good way of doing things, because like, being able to have like, reputation as this currency that circulates among, different people, I think is important, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, and I think that, the reputation for me is like one of these great power, great responsibility things, because you can with reputation, our financial transactions, we can now not treat everyone as totally fungible with each other. And so we can start to have repeat interactions with positive sum games on top of them. But there's also a lot of like negative sum surveillance implications of having reputation. So it's like one of these great power, great responsibility moments for me to be building any sort of reputation system, much less something like Sybil Resistance.
There's also the fact that people change. And, this is almost feels controversial to say, where it's like we live in a culture that is, very concerned with finding out who people really are and judging them, by their worst actions, which fair. There's a lot of good reason to do that. Like a lot of people should be judged by their worst actions. But people change over time, and the possibility to reinvent yourself and to, maybe carve out a new life. It's both very dangerous because you can let criminals, create multiple criminal identities, and that might be the more likely thing that happens. But I do think it's important for people also to have forgiveness, atonement, grow out of the traumas that they were raised in, and so, yeah, having a single immutable source of identity for one person, that it can be a mark of Cain on them as well, I think. And so it's a harder question to answer, but like, I do think the optionality to be able to create a new identity is part of what's really promising and dangerous about the internet. And it's in some ways what makes it great, in some ways what makes it really, really fraught and horrible at the same time.
Yeah, totally. Well, I know that we only have a few minutes left. I'm wondering if there's anything that I didn't ask you, David, that you want to say.
No, I think you've exhausted my larynx. No, I'm excited to jam. Like, I think Kevin, like you've been your projects have been an inspiration for me for a long time. So it's just exciting to get to talk.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and same to you. It's fun to be in the Infinite Garden together. Where can people find you online?
Twitter at divine_economy, Substack, which is actually the better writing, hopefully. davidphelps.substack.com. Those are good places to reach me.
Okay, amazing. All right. Well, thanks so much, David.
My pleasure.